Good morning. This morning I'm going to be talking about group magnetism, and this is part one. I think most of us, when we were in school, we were given, what do you call it, an axiom or a quote? I don't know what it's called. Anyway, Aristotle made this comment that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And this is something that, a phrase that I learned in college, actually. And ever since then, I've tried to understand it. I've come from different points of view, different approaches, trying to understand that statement. And that he made so long ago. And I think there are many answers, depending on where your consciousness is and your life situation is. But I think I found the answer, by Jove. And that is, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts because of group magnetism. How to explain that? Because, my background is as a professional violinist, and I've played in a lot of symphonies, symphony orchestras, some really, really, really good, and some really, really bad. And bad was high school. Good was when I was paid. But anyway, the music that we played was always music composed by a great master, a master musician. So all the parts could have been like we were in junior high or high school, as musicians in the making. That made that music sound so god-awful. But the power of the whole was the masterpiece of the music. You could never destroy the power, the significance, the harmony, the colors, the sound of that great piece of symphonic music. And so that, led me to thinking more and more about group energy and group magnetism and hierarchy. And I've discovered my answer anyway, and I'm sure it will change later on down the road. But for now, I understand group magnetism as the energy of the soul of the group. When the group and the parts of the group that have made up the group or the whole, when that whole becomes greater than the parts of the sum of the group, in other words, it's because the group now has a soul. And that soul is the magnetism of the group. So I've been part of many groups, from political, educational, environmental, and musical to spiritual. And most of these groups are made of numbers of people who all lived very diverse lives. Yet they had one thing in common, and perhaps it was their love of music, their love of nature, and the ageless wisdom, and political points of view, and so forth. Yet, despite their passions, at the time, many people would eventually drop out of that group and move on to other interests. So after many years, I learned that when such groups dissipated or dissolved, it was because the group had not yet become an organism. In other words, the soul of the group had not yet been born. It had little, if any, magnetism, or if you will, it had not yet developed a plan. Or the group was not formed as a result of a vision. It is a vision like a magnet that then transforms the lives of the members of the group. So where, think of, you can join a political group, you usually join, or a person joins a political group because they're fired up with the ideology of a particular politician. But when that politician steps out of the race, then there's no group anymore, right? So there's got to be something deeper that holds a group, not just in one incarnation to hold them together, but that magnet that will draw that group of people back together in other incarnations. It may be 500 years later, but that group comes back together again. What draws them back together again? It is the magnet of the soul. It's the soul that sends out a message or sends out the call that the next aspect of the vision is now time to manifest. And we need the power of the whole. In other words, members of that group that have a soul consciousness back into incarnation, they have to find their way back to one another again, and then that aspect of the vision comes into manifestation. The formula for a successful group is that it becomes an organism. This formula for a successful group is that it becomes an organism, and in becoming an organism, it becomes magnetic. So what is an organism? This is something that when Torkin was alive, I would discuss with him, and we get involved in this really intense and exciting and wonderful discussion, and then he'd leave the most important part blank and say, now go and learn about this. And so the learning process became the process of experience. So now I understand that an organism is a living life form. It is a living life form. A form or a group that has an inherent life in it. And that life is what? It's got to be a soul that has a heart. A soul that has a heart. You can't have a heart without a soul, or it's not a heart. So an organism starts out as an idea, let's say, just like as a seed that grows into a bush, and then into a full-grown tree to produce flowers, like a magnolia tree. They're so beautiful trees. Now, when we think of an organism is a living life form, I've created a phrase, a short term, that's called life power. A group must have a nucleus, which is a soul, but that nucleus we can understand as a life power, a life-giving power. The life power of a group comes from the united hearts of the members. So you could have 1,000 people, part of that political organization, but if their hearts are not united, there will not be a true life power coming from within that group. So a magnetic group is not based on number. It's based on the life power. Now, when we think about life power, this just coming to me. When we're thinking about life power, and the question is, how could a bunch of people come back together 500 years later and find each other? How is that possible? If you don't believe in the soul, if you don't believe in the life power of the soul, if you don't believe in reincarnation, and if you don't believe in the power of a vision, then you'll never have an answer as to how is that possible. But when you understand the power, the life-giving power or energy of the soul, which is given birth to from a vision, then you're going to understand how this all comes about. Think of where you are right now, spiritually, and I'm talking now about a spiritual group. What drew you into the spiritual group and caused you to stay with that group? To give your life to the vision, your energy, your talent to the vision of that group. How would you do, and why did you do that? It's the life-giving power coming from that soul. The soul is connected to something greater, which is the vision. Where does that vision come from? It comes from hierarchy. Hierarchy is a great vision. It is a great soul that is energized by something even greater called Shambhala, which is run by the lords of Shambhala, we are told. See, so you can see all that connectivity. And if you have a group of 5,000 people and they're only there for their self-centered interest, there is no life power in that group because everybody is there for themselves. In other words, their hearts are not united. If the hearts of the members are not united, there is no nucleus and no magnetism. And eventually the family or the group or even the nation is going to disintegrate. The life power which creates group magnetism is, in other words, a soul or a plan, aka vision, a plan that comes as a result of a vision. This soul or this vision begins to collect other souls who, like a magnet, transform their lives by the life power of the vision and the plan of the group. Do you understand where I'm taking this? Is this all foreign? Hopefully not. Let's say, a vision and a plan. Maybe it's easier to think of hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy of this planet, having a vision and a plan. Okay, it has a vision and a plan, but who's going to instrument, who's going to manifest that vision of the plan? Who? Someone has to be there. It's like Samuel Barber, one of my most loved composers. He produced this incredible music, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful music. Think of the adagio he wrote. What if nobody was there to perform the music? What if they didn't have, if the planet hadn't produced such talented people that they couldn't step into that music and play it magnificently, what would happen to the vision and the plan of Samuel Barber, his music? So it's no different than the vision and plan of hierarchy. That call is sent out, and a soul will respond. And when that soul responds, then other souls begin to be collected. And the souls come together and play the music. And the music that's being played is the plan of the vision of hierarchy. See, this is for me, it is such a magnificent way to understand the purpose of life. It sounded like a thunderbolt coming from, it was just ice cubes coming in. But just truly, when people, when people are born and we become teenagers and then we move into our 20s and 30s, we are typically all about ourselves. How much power can one teenager have? Every once in a while you'll find one teenager like, what's her name, Malala. That's extraordinary. And when you find an extraordinary person like that, behind that person you're going to find a huge army. So the point is, when this collected group of souls are born onto the planet, within a certain time frame, they will find one another again because of the magnetism of the group. The magnetism that has been given birth to from the vision and the plan that was resourced from hierarchy, which was resourced from Shambhala. A group grows. Now this is the next step. A group grows by the beingness of the members and the inherent energy they have, and according to the level of their understanding and capability and achievements. Beingness, a group grows by the beingness of the members. The teaching defines beingness as the percentage of mastery that each member has achieved over his or her personality life. That's beingness. The percentage of mastery each member has achieved over the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual life. Every progress, development, and expansion of such a group will be the result of the inherent life, or the life-giving sap that will make the tree to grow, expand, and to give fruit naturally. So the fruit would be the labor of the group, what the group produces, and how the product that the group is producing transforms society. This is very important to remember, and maybe even make a notation of. In a group organism, the members find their place and work naturally. In a group organism, the members find their place and work naturally. So group magnetism is a very important subject. If we can enter into the path of group magnetism, this almost assures us that we are going to enter into greater success, prosperity, health, and happiness. Okay, so let me, to further define group magnetism, let me say this, that a group is a collection of people who have a goal and whose frequencies are similar. 1, 2, they operate in different ways, but with different techniques and talents. They operate in different ways and with different techniques and talents. I'm going to repeat this again. A group is a collection of people who have a goal and whose frequencies are similar. It is like when I play the violin. There's usually anywhere from 80 to 107 people in a particular symphony orchestra. In the first violin section, there'd be maybe 15 to 20 violins, same thing in the second violin section, and the winds and the cellos and the basses and everything. We all had a different goal to achieve in terms of what we wanted to become, as a musician. And we all had frequencies that were different. Different frequencies could mean different ages. Some people come in and they're in their 20s, other people have been there for a while and they're in their 50s. Why different techniques? Even though when I think of the violinists that I knew, even in college and on into the professional life, we all came from being students of really, really good master teachers. And our techniques were all different. The way we held the violin, the way we held the bow, even the vibrato, we were taught how to vibrato on that violin differently than one another. See, our techniques were different, but when we came together, all of those different techniques created a talent or a pool of talent that produced the most beautiful sound. It's called integration. The integration. A group does not come into being until all the efforts and striving of the members are coordinated and with a cooperative spirit. So when we would sit down 2 nights a week, we would sit down for 3 hours each evening, sit because we had to sit. A violin, if you were a percussionist, you had to oftentimes stand. But we would sit there, and the conductor or the sectional leader would help us interpret the music and how we were going to play it. And if you can imagine, this sectional leader, oftentimes the conductor would come in and say, now this is how I want it done. Now you have a group of 20 people there that have studied and rehearsed and practiced and have the best of the best musical instrument, and yet they're being told how to interpret the music. So you have extraordinary talented people that are being told by an even more extraordinary and talented person how to interpret and define and play this music. If those 20 violinists say, hey, I'm not going to pay attention to you, I know better, they're not a group. They're just a bunch of people that have talents and good violins and good backgrounds, but they're not coordinating their talents and developing a cooperative spirit so they can work together. Or where each member is striving to bring a great ideal into manifestation, or to build something that is useful to all of humanity. Where would we be without music? Where would we be without Lincoln Center? I don't know, because That's not something we're going to have to deal with, fortunately. We have music. We have a Lincoln Center. We have great musicians. But the next time you go to a concert that's a performance of master musicians, look at that spirit of cooperation that each of them are putting into, pouring into, working together as a whole. See, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of esoteric insight about groups. Groups on different planes of consciousness. First, we have physical plane groups. And we have groups that exist in the astral plane. And we have groups that exist in the lower and higher mental planes. And we have a few groups, like hierarchy, that exist in the intuitional plane. Now, sometimes there are people who belong to all four of these groups when they are in physical incarnation. That they're not only in a physical plane group, they're also part of the group in the astral plane, the lower mental plane, the higher mental plane, and the intuitional plane. Imagine the expansiveness of such a consciousness. Most people cannot imagine such an expansive consciousness because all they see is my black and white jacket this morning. It is, we have such a rich teaching that is trying to open the door to our consciousness to higher worlds. And we just have to let go of the concrete mind in part and start thinking this way. Because when you think this way is when you begin having experiences. When one day you're going to actually, with your physical and etheric eyes, see that astral plane group. And once you can actually see and experience the astral plane group, you're going to experience that group in the higher mind. And if you're fortunate at some point to at least have a moment of contact with the group on the intuitional plane, all four groups. If you are advanced in consciousness, you can work with a group here on the physical plane, but a part of your group is in the astral plane. Some are on the mental plane and some in the intuitional plane. Are you a member of a group that has members that have that 4-level state of consciousness? If you are a student of the teaching and a member of a discipleship group, these points are very important points for you to remember. If you do not, you're going to try to build your group with large numbers of people, thinking that this is what comprises the success of any group. I was going to say compromises, which it does. If you build your group of large numbers of men and women who are not related to the life power of the group, who are not integrated and in alignment with the plan of hierarchy, you will not have a group organism. Nor will your group be associated with groups in the higher worlds. It is not possible. Sometimes a group can be spread all over the world. A group organism can be spread all over the world, where they are not all in the same place, but subjectively, they can be one group. For example, let's say that we are a group in this life. And in the next life, we may disperse and not come together physically until maybe 500 years later. It depends on the call. See, when we can see this whole governmental operation, hierarchical governmental operation, how the hierarchy acts upon the plan and the vision of Shambhala. That plan and vision of Shambhala is impressed upon the masterminds of the hierarchy. Then the masterminds of the hierarchy gather together at certain times throughout the year or through greater cycles. And as they come together, they're coming together with other heads of other planets and the heads of other planetary schemes. And they come together and they formulate the vision and plan of Shambhala into a workable, organic idea that then is distributed to the 7 major ashrams of the hierarchy. And these 7 major ashrams have sub-ashrams. You know, they're all divided from, like you have a Ray 1 ashram that is then subdivided into the rays 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have the main ashram headed by the Ray 2, or Love Wisdom, and that Love Wisdom ashram is divided into sub-rays of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. Then, through the law of precipitation and the law of magnetism, the senior disciples will be impressed, those that are in incarnation and those that are not yet in incarnation. The souls of all these beings will be impressed with their aspect of the plan of Shambhala and hierarchy, and now the work of that particular ashram and sub-ashrams, till finally that magnetic energy goes out to the physical people. And if those physical people have been waiting and looking and seeking, what is the purpose of my life? The soul all of a sudden wakes up and begins to search to find their soul group again. It's such an incredible process. If people realize the true meaning of group, they would know that group means sacredness. This is why friends and families and groups and nations and humanity are all sacred. Here's a nice example to help explain the power of a magnetic group. A person can be in the physical plane, but helps groups on higher planes, and vice versa. How is this done? For example, let us say that you have constructed the Antakarana Bridge. And now you are talking here on the physical plane, while one part of your soul is building a temple on the intuitional plane. So what you see may not actually be what is happening. Sometimes things happen that are psychologically not explainable to you. You may become abstracted in a particular moment and not hear the people around and about you talking because you are not here for a few moments. You are abstracted. Your soul, a part of your soul is abstracted to another plane of consciousness, another part of the group. So maybe you are elsewhere doing something there, but your physical body is still here. And this is clearly described in the Agni Yoga teaching. When you are sleeping, you may travel. Many people do this. But when you have built a portion of the Antakarana bridge, you can do 3 or 4 things mentally. So you want to get that Antakarana bridge built. When you have that Antakarana bridge built, working, it's constructed, it's working, you have 3, 4, or sometimes even 5 gears that are working together simultaneously. In this way, you come in contact with your group members on all planes of subjective consciousness and from all over the world. Interesting, huh? This is such a wonderful, wonderful talk. Okay, magnetism. Magnetism is the power of attraction. Magnetism comes into being when solar energy fuses with matter. When solar energy fuses with matter, this is when magnetism comes into being. For example, when the solar energy penetrates into iron, it becomes magnetic. That's the science. We have 3 kinds of energy. This is spiritual science: fire by friction, solar fire, and electric fire. These fires create magnetism in matter. So if you have a group that is creating fire by friction, solar fire, and electric fire, you've got quite a magnetic group. Physical, emotional, mental, higher mental, intuitional energies and groups all working together because they're aligned and integrated. These fires create magnetism in matter. Everything that exists in the world has magnetic properties. But you can study physics and learn more about the magic of magnetism. Now, the magnetism of a person. In each of us and every human being, there is physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual magnetism. For example, as a person, in you, your soul is the sun. You get it? Okay, the soul is your sun. When the soul fuses with your etheric body, you become magnetic physically, and people feel it. When your soul fuses with your etheric body, you become physically magnetic. When your etheric body absorbs the radiation from the soul-sun, the physical body becomes magnetic. When the physical body is magnetic, you draw money and sex, and which is creativity, creative people, and objects to you. They just come to you. You don't have to work hard to get them. When your soul energy fuses with your astral body, you develop emotional magnetism. When you have emotional magnetism, people begin to respect you, dedicate and devote themselves to you, and you attract emotional objects, lower and higher objects to you. For example, there's a time when the lower astral body is magnetized and you draw a mess around you, like a sponge soaking up dirty water. You feel other people's feelings, anxieties, pains, and sufferings. These are all felt through the solar plexus center. Now, there are groups like this. There was a group in the city that I spent about 30 years in Florida, that was a church, and this church pulled away from the mother church and became their own individual entity, and they began to attract people that were part of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon and drug addiction and so forth, and these were all people that were trying to transform themselves, to move out of the addictions. Imagine what it was like to be part, of the, let's say, the government or the organizational process of running such a church. Extremely difficult because of the anxieties and pains and sufferings. They were all functioning through that lower part of the solar plexus. It's just something to think about. When the soul infuses with the mental body, you become magnetic mentally. When you are magnetic on the lower mental level, you draw currents of knowledge, books, etc., and teachers and people come to you. When the higher mind becomes magnetic, you become flooded by great visions and ideas. You draw mental entities who come around you when you are writing or speaking, and they remind you of things. This is why when Val said this morning, and I pulled out my lecture notes, she said, there's hardly any paper there. My lectures for a 40-minute lecture is 6 pages, 16-point type. 1,500 to 1,800 words. It used to be 15 pages, 12-point type, 6,000 to 8,000 words. But what happens is, like this morning, 80% of what I've said this morning are not in my notes because those mental entities come around me and say this, say that. So it's a whole new talk, even for me. So, okay. When you are lecturing, 3, 4, or 5 come and tell you to say this or that. Telepathically, they advise us. If you have this experience, you know how even when you don't have a subject, everything you need comes to you, and you will talk and talk. Now, this does not mean that you're a great lecturer, but that you are reminded of stories and experiences and anecdotes about some enlightenment that you've had. And their help brings it out. When you are intuitively magnetic, great currents of energy, of sacrificial service are attracted to you. You have energy to serve. You dedicate yourself to do heroic things and to do great things. Okay, so let me close with this. A magnetic group and an organic group is a cooperative group. In cooperation, it is not the individual who is glorified, but the group. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In every cooperative labor, there exists a leader who attracts the co-workers by what? The magnet of the plan. As the work proceeds, he turns into a source of inspiration and courage. Eventually, when the goal is achieved, he tries to raise the labor of cooperation onto a higher level where more sacrificial and more focused labor is needed. A true leader inspires co-workers to lead themselves toward the goal, on through the path of the most essential. On every level of development, cooperation is possible, but progressive and inclusive cooperation is possible only when the labor of cooperation comes into the manifestation of the whole. So I feel, in this particular incarnation, what a blessing it was to have been part of, as a violinist, to have been part of so many different, integrated groups, and to learn the value of leadership. I can't even begin to tell you that every day I learn something new, and I can always resource the examples that music and being part of an orchestra and so forth, gave to me. So then I can better understand the power of group magnetism, and I can respect the power of hierarchy and the great masters, the Mahashohans, and beyond. It is such a gift to align yourself, first to integrate yourself, and then become aligned with such a great vision and a great plan. And even though the process of manifestation is very slow, at least we have reincarnation to continue to grow and manifest this great plan. Okay, so next week, I'm going to end there, and next week I'll give part 2 of this talk.